Alice Lewin's perspective. Alice thought Arthur had to be the most adorable baby, and she told herself she wasn't just saying this as a doting mother. Alice thought, no, him and his scruffy little patch of glowing auburn hair and playful blue eyes that almost radiated light. His gaze, at times, seemed almost intelligent. Alice thought, no, I told you, I'm not a doting mother. She planned to be a strict and just mother. She couldn't rely on her husband to teach little Art any common sense. Reynolds had tried to teach her baby how to fight when he could barely crawl. She knew this little rascal would turn out just like his father if she left him be. As soon as he started crawling, she was so proud she was on the verge of tears, but she didn't know how much of a handful he'd become once mobile. She swore there wasn't a single moment where she could take her eyes off him before he crawled into the study room. How weird. They had made sure to buy him lots of stuffed animals and wooden toys, but he always ended up back in the study room. That, at least, was the opposite of his father, seeing how Reynolds almost gravitated away from texts longer than the weekly newspaper. Seeing how excited he got when they went out to town, she had decided to go shopping for food once every other day, instead of twice a week. Alice thought, no, I told you, I'm not a doting mother. This is for his education of the outside world and for fresh food in the house. Yeah, haha, that's it. Her son seemed interested in many things. She couldn't get enough of his disproportionately large head turning left and right, trying to take everything in. He seemed particularly intrigued by his father's practices. Reynolds was a pretty competent adventurer back in the days, reaching B class by age 28, which was fast. Becoming even an E class required a test. As for higher ranks, she had only seen a couple of A-class adventurers and had yet to see an S-class, assuming they existed. Working at the Adventurer Guild Hall in Valden, she saw too many eager teens, surprised they didn't float off from inflated egos. At least they were ambitious. Once, while proctoring a basic practical exam, a kid crashed backward because his sword was too heavy. Talking about airheads, Reynolds had seemed like one back then. The moment he saw her, his jaw dropped until the guy behind him elbowed him. He wiped his drool and mumbled, "Reynolds, hi, can I trade in the stuff for the mission?" She just giggled as he turned beet red. He later gathered the courage to ask her out, and they hit it off. Even now, she couldn't help but smile seeing his droopy blue puppy eyes. Art somehow wound up with both their redeeming traits, making him adorable. When she changed his diapers, he turned red and covered his face. Alice thought, can babies his age even get embarrassed? The next landmark in her baby journal, purely for educational purposes, not because she was a doting mother, was when he first said Mama. Arthur, Mama! Alice thought, he said Mama. She made him say it again and again to be sure. Reynolds sulked because Art said Mama before Dada. Alice thought, haha, I won. The rest of the year went pleasantly. Her son stuck by her and often watched his father practice outside after dinner. She was glad Reynolds gave up adventuring for a guard post nearby. Adventuring brought more money, but the uncertainty wasn't worth it. To their relief, little Art never got sick. However, she often found him sitting still, eyes closed. At first, she thought he was having trouble relieving himself, but checks proved otherwise. Alice thought, how strange. I didn't know how to really make it out. I thought babies his age were supposed to be energetic, but after his episodes of escaping to the study room, he seemed to spend a lot of time sitting still, almost meditating. She was worried initially, but although it happened a couple of times a day, it only lasted minutes, and Art seemed strangely happy afterwards. The way he held his arms up made her just want to gobble him up. Alice thought, not a doting mother. Arthur Lewin's perspective. About 2 years had passed since Arthur made his difficult journey to the study room. Since then, he had been constantly trying to gather the little bits of mana spread out in his body and focus it to form a mana core. It was a slow and arduous task. He found it easier to learn walking on his hands than willing his mana together in his damnable body. He could see why the book said it took until adolescence to awaken. If he let the mana particles move naturally, it would take a decade to form a core. Instead, having an adult's mental capacity allowed him to consciously will the particles together, similar to controlling ki in his past life. It involved sensing mana and forcing it near the solar plexus. Arthur thought, I'm just grabbing the feathers and shoving it down to the ground instead of waiting for them to float down, figuratively speaking. His daily rituals involved spending his limited energy gathering mana while avoiding suspicion. His father seemed to think throwing a child high in the air was enjoyable. When mana reinforced Reynolds's arms, throwing Arthur like a projectile only induced nausea and a fear of heights. Fortunately, his mother had a firm handle on his father, but she sometimes scared him too, staring at him like he was premium meat. He adapted by talking in simple sentences. After first saying, "Mama," for more food, Alice almost burst into tears. Arthur thought, "It's been a long time since I received this sort of motherly affection." He limited his speech to get points across, no grammar needed. Besides that, his training pace was slow but strenuous. He was getting a big head start, so he wasn't complaining. He was in the middle of gathering mana particles. These past 2 years hadn't gone to waste. He had finally gathered all his mana into his solar plexus and was condensing it into a mana core when, boom!